I don't know if this is an answer you can give, but we'll ask it anyways, because if I don't, I know a number of people would be angry at me. On the question sheet, I put a smiley face next to it. I said, I'll truncate a little bit. Where do you think the Legacy Shogun Megazord is right now?
Great question. So I'll parallel that mystery to what we all kind of know and saw in the trade shows leading up to that, like you mentioned before, that earthquake announcement that the future is going to change in a big way. Because what that does is it makes you guys stop and think, well, gosh, what stuff that's either been shown or promised now falls by the wayside, right? So thankfully at this point, everyone's fears were assuaged that, once those sample review copies of, the Zeo staff and the Zeonizers went out, okay, whew, sigh of relief. Those aren't just going to disappear and not be released. The other question there is, and this falls a little bit closer to what you're asking as far as, well, what about things that aren't that far along? We all saw weird, not stood up on stands, kind of janky, laying there on a shelf, looked like models of the Psycho Rangers. And that one of my points of pride were to make Jason's heart swell and to make your guys' heart swell when at the various stages, the first concept stage of, okay, guys, hear me out on this. But the Psycho Rangers, what do we think about adding them into Legacy line? Pitching it up to Saban and having Jason be the advocate to go, guys, if you trust me on anything, it's these guys are awesome. We need to make these characters. Where do those guys lay? I looked at those pictures as close as possible, and again, they were so weirdly just kind of plopped onto a shelf that I couldn't tell if those were just conceptual models for product development or if they were actual what would become tooling models. So my answer to your question, and I pulled Psycho Rangers in there on purpose to help answer that, is anything that Bandai cut steel on, which of course is what we all call tooling. Mm-hmm. If they did the tooling, and if it behooves them to make back their investment on that tooling to ship product and it's in the pipeline to get developed and shipped in time before they don't have the rights, it behooves them to do it. If, however, they didn't tool it yet, you can bet as sure as you're a bippy that it won't happen. And then within those two variables, there's another variable, which is if they did tool it, and if they then look at what they can or can't do in time before they're no longer the master partner shelf presence for Power Rangers, would they then go shrug their shoulders, eat that tooling cost, and still not produce? So your answer there, I don't know where in the development stage or even conceptual stage Shogun Megazord was, and we saw evidence that there were indeed 3D, physical samples of at least 3 of the Psycho Rangers, not the females. The question then lies, are those going to get made either? And I think only time will tell. And I gave you 3 speculative possible scenarios there based on tooling, timing, and what ultimately Saban and Bandai both agree to pull the trigger on before the license changes hands.
Yeah, I know in the UK there's I think it's Smith's toy. They're taking pre-orders already for the first 3 Psycho Rangers. So okay. I think that's a good indication.
That's a good sign. That implies that that implies 2 things. One more strongly than the other. The weaker implication there is that they got sold on that and then it got canceled and they don't know it yet, which I really doubt. I think I worked with a lot of people with huge integrity at Bandai. I don't think anyone would do that knowingly. So hopefully that means is the more likely variable in those 2 scenarios is that you'll at least get those 3.
Because it's supposed to be, I believe it's the next quote-unquote series to come out, because we've already had series 4 and 5 in the last 2 months come out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's series 6, so that would be something that hits, summertime.
Okay, so here's some other fun speculation then. And again, this is just me knowing what the efficiencies of product development are and maybe some potential low-hanging fruit for them if they did indeed want to pursue it, right? So we just talked about only seeing the guy sculpts. If they did do development on the girl sculpts, then chances are it's probably the same sculpt with the exception of the helmet, right? Mm-hmm. Same body sculpt, same bust, same hips, same waist. If that was in development already and just hasn't been shown yet, potentially again, whether it was a retailer exclusive, whether it's just a wave they haven't announced yet, whether it's a wave they haven't announced yet and doesn't ever get announced, whether it's the last hurrah maybe for them at San Diego Comic-Con, if there is even a last hurrah for them at San Diego Comic-Con, maybe the gals do get released. It's worth speculating, it's worth hoping and asking for, but really at the end of the day, it's truly going to come down to dollars and cents of what Bandai can responsibly invest in the system before not having the brand anymore, and what they could, responsibly do with retailers to ship in time before, the reset button gets hit.
Yeah. Let me follow that question up with my own personal question. I can't believe I thought this was on here. I'm just kind of like looking through the questions. I'm like, wow, did I forget to ask that question?
Black on here, okay? It's black.
Well, I was going to ask you, in your opinion, what in the world happened with that Legacy Gold Ranger figure and the lack of gold paint? Well, let me preface that with, we've never gotten an official answer either from Bandai or Saban. Everyone's asked, no one's gotten an official response, or if they did, they were asked not to share it or have not shared it. Some people think it's safety, some people think it's cost cutting. Having worked on the toy line yourself and having, helped create these figures, what's your opinion? What is something that you can say that would answer that question for the people, some people that are so angry about it, but, for people that are just curious, like why would that happen when at the same time you can get a Ninja Steel Gold Ranger with the correct gold color in a 12-inch scale?
Yep. Perfectly understandable question and perfectly understandable backlash. It should not have been that way. And, again, I try to put myself in the position of people that, were working on it when I wasn't there. And I also put myself in the position of my prior self who would have, made I would have had anyone who knows me, I never raise my voice in meetings or do the Chris Farley flip the table upside down show of anger. But again, pardon the phrase, if you will, I would have had a quiet internal storm shit fit if that's what was told to me. Like, oh, by the way, and this is how we're going to release it. Now, it didn't work that way there. Like, they would have essentially said, hey, maybe because of X, Y, and Z reasons, we're thinking we probably have to release it this way. Mm-hmm. Do we think that's going to be okay? Do we have any alternative solutions to fix that? So here's what I think. Here's what I think from my Monday morning quarterback standpoint is that, if I'm not mistaken, the armor is a different material than the rest of the plastic of the figure, right?
The chest pieces, yes.
Yeah. So, and I understand, I know what that material is because I know we did other products either that had that element to it in addition to other mixed plastics, or a majority of a piece of that item had that same plastic. And you can think of some of the items actually going back as far as like Megaforce that had that softer, soft
kind of bendy plastic, yeah.
Yeah. And the thing that's tough about that material is it does not hold paint well. The typical spray ops for an action figure is not amenable to that material. The material, whether it's the oil composition or the plastic composition, it doesn't hold paint, whether it's easy to scratch off or the paint won't sit well on it to give you the same level of sculpt relief that you would have without that paint. So the easy way to deal with that is to try to mold that piece in as close to a color as possible as you want without having to ever deco it, or knowing that you can't deco it. Now that said, why the decision was made to have the armor be that material is a fair question to ask, because at the end of the day, if the chest piece was sculpted with that armor on it in a sense that you're never going to remove it anyway, and there's no value really to having it in a tactile perspective, to having it be that soft, why was it that soft, and therefore why was it not part of the regular ABS plastic sculpt of the figure that you absolutely could have done an amazing bang-up job, to your point, even on a chintzy, cheap 12-inch figure, to get that gold paint on there like there should have been. And that's the problem-solving, solutions-oriented stuff that I would have, patiently and proactively and positively in my leadership role there would have said to the team, hey, have we explored this? Is there a specific reason why we can't do the entire upper body in ABS plastic and paint it the correct way? Because that's not gold. That's hot mustard from McDonald's, which tastes delicious, but does not make for a good gold action figure. And, in other products, even within our own range, in our own line there, even on, in different themes, if I'm not mistaken, I think some part of the Megaforce, Lion's sword had that kind of same plastic and that same color, and it made sense. It's a role play weapon. You can't have that thing have a really hard blade and then not expect someone to hurt themselves. And for that kind of product, it approximated gold in just the right way. It didn't need to be shiny. In fact, it was a kid's toy, not a collector's item. When you're doing a collector's item, and your point of differentiation and your point of trust between you and the fans is to make it as authentic, real, and wonderful as possible. That's the questions you have to be asking yourself, whether it's schedule and timing issue, whether it's a resources and costing issue, and you brought up one option, whether it was the option for this or not, safety and hazard issue for sure.
Yeah.
There might have been some sort of reason or variable in any of those things we just talked about that led to that decision being made. All I can tell you is that if that was put forth to me, I would have asked all the same questions that you guys asked and, essentially, quote unquote, fought against it.
I think the only reason the shield isn't made of that softer plastic is to accommodate the ab crunch joint, because the shield does move slightly to do that ab crunch, to have them bend forward or bend back.
That's a strong possibility. And again, then a choice was made to either not compromise the posability and flexibility versus fingers crossed hoping that the gold soft plastic would do what everyone wanted and hoped for, which is look gold.
And the strange thing about it too is that in the Series 5, because the way these figures have been released in the last 2 months has been strange. So you had Series 4, and then you had Series 4 with one Series 5 figure in it, and now you have Series 5 with two Series 4 figures in it, and then it's all Series 5 after that, minus the girls, of course. So it's been strange, but in one of these transition assortments, we'll call it, they actually did go and paint hit the gold outline on his visor and his cuffs, his handcuffs. Very minor. They actually did go paint that gold, but nothing else.
Right.
And it's kind of like
as a reactionary response, as opposed to a let's get it right the first time type of response, right?
Well, I don't even know if it's reactionary because you can barely tell the difference. I mean, for the most part, all the the shield parts on the legs, the arms, the actual shield itself, the staff, it's all that same hot mustard color. It's just the visor has a little bit of gold trim, and then the little gold trim right where the hand joint is, or the handball joint is. That's it.
Yeah. Look, there's certain things you can be fast and loose with and play around with when you're doing an assortment of action figures, and let's say one of them, whether it's because you're shipping a series of Marvel figures and the Hulk is bigger than the rest of the characters. So the Hulk is going to cost you more money to make, but the price point's the same unless you are willing to take that big step and break your price point and make the Hulk more expensive. Now, fans don't want that. Retailers don't want that because now it's a new item set up and a new SKU number just to sell the Hulk, right?
Yeah.
So really what you're forced to do is get creative with your marketing and your product development team and your costing team and go, okay, if you're going to have a Hulk in a series, do you need to get a smaller, skinnier figure that can essentially be that differential in plastic and deco that you're now going to invest in a larger figure? So do you do Spidey and Hulk in the same assortment, because Spidey's going to cost a little bit less because he's smaller and skinnier if you're doing him true to form. Yeah. Those type of methodologies can go across any action figure line. And, one of the issues then, again, what you posit as a potential there as the weight, as the articulation and the armor then disrupting that's a perfectly logical and for all we know, very real reason as to why they did that. But if you have someone who's gold and you have someone who was essentially the hero figure of that entire series that people name checking, like, we can't wait for Zeo Gold, we can't wait for Zeo Gold. Not that you ever said that, of course.
No, never.
Then what planning ahead does is, all right, guys, we got to double down and he's going to cost a little bit more. So what can we do in the rest of the wave to help accommodate that? Do you do something really extreme, like short that wave by a figure? Do you, do you defer costs from one thing to another? Do you go for a blended profit margin as opposed to an individualized, what profit margin does, Spider-Man get me versus what kind of profit margin does Hulk get me in the same line? There's ways to work around it if you're diligent and if you're clever and you work hard. And it doesn't imply that people on the scene on this one didn't. I just don't know that they made the right decision in those earlier enough stages to make you guys happy on the first go round.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe one day when all is said and done and people are free from their jobs and so forth, maybe we can get an actual answer on that one. Because just personally speaking, just from a creation standpoint, design development standpoint, I'm kind of interested in exactly why that would happen the way it did. So maybe, who knows? Maybe we'll finally get an actual factual answer at some point.
And then related to that, again, 'cause it's the same product line, it was Legacy figures. And then sometimes you literally just have a dumb, stupid mistake made at some point in the information chain or supply chain, i.e., why the belts were wrong on Mighty Morphin Legacy.
I was just going to ask that.
Like that honestly, it boiled down to just a terrible, stupid miscommunication and someone making a mistake at either the office or factory level. And those are the ones that hurt, dare I say, the most, because it's like, wait, that was 100% preventable. Yeah. It wasn't like we all locked ourselves in a room for 6 hours and figured out, okay, what is the least painful way to make this happen, that we can always try to get people to see our point of view or understand why the A, B, and C happened. When something like that happens, it's just one of those things where you're like, my God, like we did everything right on this and worked so hard on this. It hurts when something so silly and so basic happens. And, I mean, I rolled my eyes at the same time, was like, well, I mean, from a fan standpoint, I guess it's not the craziest theory in the world when I don't know if it was Bruno or somebody was like, yeah, we got to let people know that you didn't either quit over that or nor did you get fired over that, because that's your crazy Alex Jones level conspiracy theory that in the wrong hands could take a life of its own. And I was like, yes, whatever you guys can do to divorce anyone of that notion, please do. And if you need a statement from me that says so, and if not, maybe it'll just trail off and die on its own and not become an actual meme or something.
I've never heard that conspiracy theory, so that's a new one to me. I'm sure when this interview gets out, someone will be like, wait, Greg got fired for the silver belts?
I mean, could you imagine? Could you imagine doing all the good, positive things that we did together and then something like that, be like, oh, wow, you set the bar really high for yourself, Greg. For this reason, you gotta go.
It's kind of like, yeah, it'd be like, well, that was he got 2 warnings. The first warning was the Ninja Storm morphers on the wrong hands, or, swapped. That was strike 1, and this was strike 3, unfortunately. Cause, it was 3 figure, blah, 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 whatever. Blah, whatever. Blah, whatever.